parents, children, aunts, and uncles has gathered. From the outside, it's a perfect holiday scene. But within those walls, a silent, methodical evil is about to be unleashed. This isn't just a crime story, it's the anatomy of a forgotten tragedy. Let's travel back to that fateful Thanksgiving. The family was seated, ready to share their meal. There was laughter, conversation, the typical sounds of a holiday get-together. But sometime during the evening, an intruder, or perhaps someone already inside, began a systematic execution. According to the sparse reports that survive, there were no screams heard by neighbors. No signs of a struggle. The killer moved with a terrifying calmness, from room to room, targeting each family member with ruthless precision. This wasn't a crime of passion. It was a calculated slaughter. The following morning, a concerned neighbor, noticing the house was unusually quiet and the lights were still on from the night before, decided to check in. What they discovered was a scene of unimaginable horror. The police were called, and when they entered the de la Roche home, they walked into a time capsule of terror. The Thanksgiving feast lay untouched on the dining table. Chairs were overturned, but the house was deathly silent. Every single member of the family, from the oldest to the youngest, was dead. Investigators at the time were hardened professionals, but even they were shaken. One officer famously described the scene not as a home, but as a human abattoir. The sheer brutality was one thing, but the lack of obvious clues was another. There was no forced entry, suggesting the killer was either let in or was already present. Nothing of significant value was stolen, ruling out a simple robbery gone wrong. The motive was a complete and utter mystery. Who would want to annihilate an entire family, and why on Thanksgiving? But here's where the story takes an even more bizarre and disturbing turn. Forensic evidence, limited as it was back then, suggested the killer didn't just flee after the murders. They stayed. For hours. They moved through the house, methodically altering the crime scene. Curtains were drawn closed. Certain items were wiped clean of fingerprints, while others were deliberately left untouched. Some bodies were repositioned, almost as if they were being posed. It was as if the killer was crafting a gruesome message, a twisted narrative that investigators, to this day, have never been able to decipher. Was it a ritual? A warning? Or the act of a deranged mind playing a game with law enforcement? The investigation that followed was one of the largest in the state's history. Detectives interviewed hundreds of people, friends, business associates, estranged relatives. They chased down every possible lead. Every whisper of a rumor. The family's finances were scrutinized. Their personal lives dissected. Were there secret debts, a hidden feud, an unknown enemy with a score to settle? Theories ranged from a mob hit to a cult killing, to a lone, psychopathic drifter who just happened to choose that house on that night. But every lead turned into a dead end. Every theory crumbled under the lack of evidence. For a brief period, the Thanksgiving Massacre, as the papers dubbed it, was front-page news across the country. The public was both horrified and fascinated. How could such a brutal crime happen in a quiet, respectable community? And how could the killer simply vanish without a trace? The pressure on law enforcement was immense. But as days turned into weeks, and weeks into months, the trail went cold. No new evidence surfaced. No witnesses came forward. And slowly, tragically, the media moved on to the next sensational story. This is perhaps the most haunting aspect of the de la Roche case, how quickly it was forgotten. And like other infamous mass murders that have become ingrained in our cultural psyche, this one faded into obscurity. There are no best-selling books, no blockbuster movies, no legions of internet sleuths dedicated to solving it. It's as if the case was intentionally buried. But why? One theory points to simple investigative failure in an era before DNA technology and advanced forensics. The killer was careful, the police were overwhelmed, and the evidence was simply not there. Without a clear suspect or motive, the case file was destined to gather dust in a cold case unit. Another, more sinister theory suggests a cover-up. Did the investigation lead to someone so powerful, so well-connected, that shutting down the case was the only option? Was the de la Roche family involved in something that powerful people wanted to keep hidden? This might explain the lack of official records and the strange silence surrounding the case in historical archives. It has a compelling thought that the truth was suppressed to protect a secret far darker than the murders themselves. And then there's the psychological component. Perhaps the crime was so senseless, so devoid of any rational explanation, that society simply couldn't process it. It's easier to forget a monster you can't understand. We create narratives for crime, greed, jealousy, revenge, but what if there was no narrative here? What if it was just pure, random, incomprehensible evil? Maybe we, as a society, chose to forget because remembering was simply too terrifying. Decades have passed. The old de la Roche house no longer stands. The investigators who worked the case are long gone. The physical evidence has likely been lost or destroyed. All that remains is the ghost of a story, a chilling whisper from the past. A family wiped out on a day of thanks. A killer who walked away into the night and was never seen again. A mystery that has become a footnote in the annals of American crime. So the next time you gather with your loved ones for a holiday meal, remember the de la Roche family. Their story serves as a stark reminder that sometimes the greatest horrors are not the ones we see in movies, but the real-life tragedies that get lost to time. The questions remain unanswered, hanging in the air like the cold November fog on that terrible night. Who committed this atrocity? And why?